Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lessons from Life. My name is Michael, and 14 years ago, I married the woman I thought I would grow old with. Her name was Sarah. When we first met, she was working at a small coffee shop near my office. I remember the first thing I noticed about her. She smiled at everyone, even people who were rude to her, even customers who complained. She always smiled. One day I asked her, "How do you do that?" She looked confused. "Do what?" "Smile at people who don't deserve it." She laughed, and she said, "Maybe they need it more than the people who are nice to me." That was Sarah. Kind, patient, and somehow always thinking about everyone except herself. We dated for 2 years. Then I proposed. She said yes, and for a while, life was perfect. We weren't rich, we didn't have a big house, but we had each other, and I thought that was enough. Then we had our first child, a little girl named Emily. 3 years later, our son Jack was born. Suddenly, our quiet little life became chaotic. There were toys everywhere, dirty laundry, school runs, late-night crying, and almost no sleep. But I loved it. I loved coming home to my family. I loved seeing Sarah holding our children. And every night, before we went to sleep, I would tell her, "I don't know what I would do without you." She always smiled and said, "You'll never have to find out." I believed her. Things started changing when I lost my job. It happened suddenly. One Friday afternoon, my boss called me into his office. He closed the door and told me the company was cutting staff. I was one of them. I remember walking home that day, feeling like I had failed my family. I didn't tell Sarah immediately. When I finally came home, she knew something was wrong. She looked at me and asked, "What happened?" I told her. She didn't panic. She didn't blame me. She simply walked over, hugged me, and said, "We'll figure it out." I looked at her. "How?" She smiled. "Together." Those 2 words gave me hope. I found another job eventually, but it paid much less. We had to cut back on everything. No more vacations, no expensive dinners. We stopped buying things we didn't need, and Sarah started working part-time. At first, I hated it. I wanted to be the one taking care of my family, but Sarah never complained. She worked during the day, came home, cooked dinner, helped the children with homework, and somehow still found time to smile. I should have noticed how tired she was, but I didn't. I was too busy trying to survive. Years passed. Our children grew older. Emily became a teenager. Jack started high school, and somewhere along the way, Sarah and I stopped being a couple. We became a team. We discussed bills, school, groceries, appointments, but we stopped talking about us. I would come home from work exhausted. Sarah would be busy with something. I'd ask, "How was your day?" She'd say, "Fine." I'd say, "Mine too." And that was it. We weren't fighting. We weren't unhappy. We were just distant. I didn't realize it at the time, but sometimes a marriage doesn't end with a big argument. Sometimes it slowly disappears between ordinary days. One night, Sarah asked me something. "Michael, when was the last time we went somewhere together?" I was watching television. I thought for a moment. "I don't know." She smiled sadly. "Exactly." I looked at her. "What do you mean?" She shook her head. "Nothing." I should have turned off the television. I should have sat beside her. I should have asked what was wrong. But I didn't. I simply said, "I'm tired, Sarah," and I went to bed. That moment would come back to me many times later. A few months later, Sarah started acting differently. She became quieter. She spent more time outside the house. She started taking phone calls in another room, and sometimes she would disappear for hours. I became suspicious. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop thinking, is there someone else? One evening, I asked her, "Sarah, Is there something you're not telling me? She looked at me. What do you mean? You're always leaving. You're always on your phone. You don't talk to me anymore. She stared at me. Then she said, maybe I'm just tired. Tired of what? She didn't answer. Instead, she walked away. And for some reason, I became angry. I said something I immediately regretted. Maybe you're tired of being married to me. She stopped. I could see the pain in her face. But she didn't argue. She simply said, maybe. Then she walked away. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did she. 3 weeks later, I came home early from work. The house was quiet. I walked upstairs, and that's when I saw her. Sarah was packing. I stood in the doorway. My heart started beating faster. What are you doing? She didn't answer. Sarah. She slowly turned around. Her eyes were red. She had been crying. I looked at the suitcase, then at her. Are you leaving me? She looked down. I need some time. Why? She shook her head. I can't do this anymore. I felt something break inside me. Do what? She finally looked at me. Be invisible. I didn't understand. What are you talking about? She started crying. I've spent 14 years taking care of everyone. You, the kids, the house, everything. And somewhere, along the way, I disappeared. I stood there, speechless. She continued. Do you know when the last time you asked me what I wanted was? I couldn't answer, because I knew. I didn't remember, and that scared me. Sarah picked up her suitcase. Then she said, I don't want to leave you, but I don't know how to stay like this. And then she walked past me. I didn't follow her. I couldn't. I sat on the edge of our bed, trying to understand what had just happened. Then I noticed something, a small envelope. It was sitting on the dresser. My name was written on it. Michael. I opened it. Inside was a letter. I started reading, and within seconds, my hands began shaking. Sarah had written everything, every sacrifice, every dream she had given up, every time she had wanted to tell me she was struggling, but didn't. Then I reached the final page, and I read something that changed everything. Sarah had been saving money for years, not for herself, not for another man, not to leave me. She had been saving it for our family. Our daughter, Emily, had been accepted into a university far away. The tuition was expensive. We couldn't afford it. Sarah had secretly been working extra hours, taking additional shifts, and saving every dollar. She had planned to pay for Emily's education, but she never told me, because she knew I was already struggling financially. She didn't want me to feel like I had failed. I put the letter down, and I started crying. I had spent months wondering if my wife was leaving me for someone else. Meanwhile, she had been sacrificing herself, trying to give our daughter a future, and I had been too blind to see it. I found Sarah sitting in her car. She was about to leave. I opened the passenger door. She looked at me. What are you doing here? I held the letter. I read this. Her face changed. You weren't supposed to read that. Why? Because I didn't want you to feel guilty. I sat beside her. Sarah. She looked out the window. I said, I'm sorry. She shook her head. Don't. No, I looked at her. I need to say this. I thought you were leaving me because you didn't love me anymore. She closed her eyes. I never stopped loving you. Then why didn't you tell me you were unhappy? She looked at me. Because you were always trying to save everyone. And I didn't want to become another problem you had to solve. That sentence broke me. I reached for her hand. This time, she didn't pull away. I said, you were never a problem. You were the person I was supposed to come home to. She started crying, and I realized something. For 14 years, I had been trying to provide for my family. But somewhere along the way, I had forgotten to be present for them. I had given my family money, a house, food, security. But I had stopped giving them me. That night, Sarah didn't leave. She put the suitcase away. But things didn't magically become perfect. We still had problems. We still argued. We still had bills. We still had difficult days. But something changed. We started talking again. Really talking. I asked Sarah questions, not about groceries, not about bills, not about the children. I asked her, "What do you want?" At first, she didn't know how to answer, so I asked again, "What makes you happy?" She thought about it. Then she smiled. "I don't remember." That answer hurt. So we started small. Once a week, Sarah and I went somewhere together. Sometimes it was just a walk. Sometimes we had coffee. Sometimes we sat in the car and talked for hours. No phones, no television, no distractions. Just us, the two people who had fallen in love 14 years earlier, trying to find each other again. A year later, our daughter Emily left for university. Sarah and I drove her there together. After we helped her move into her dorm, we stood outside. Emily hugged both of us. Then she said, "Thank you." Sarah started crying. I looked at my wife, and suddenly I understood everything. The extra shifts, the late nights, the secret savings, the suitcase, the tears. Sarah hadn't stopped loving us. She had simply become exhausted from loving everyone and forgetting herself. That evening, Sarah and I drove home. It was a long drive. For the first hour, neither of us said anything. Then I reached across the center console and held her hand. She looked at me. I smiled. She smiled back. And I said, "Thank you." She laughed. "For what?" "For not leaving." She squeezed my hand. "I almost did." "I know." Then she looked out the window and whispered, "But I'm glad I stayed." That was the moment I finally understood something about marriage. Love doesn't always disappear because people stop loving each other. Sometimes love gets buried. Under bills, under stress, under responsibilities, under children, under work, under the endless noise of everyday life. And if you're not careful, you can wake up one morning and realize you've spent years living beside the person you love without really seeing them. I almost lost my wife, not because she didn't love me, but because I had forgotten to notice that she was hurting. I thought being a good husband meant providing for my family, and it does, but that's not all it means. Sometimes being a good husband means asking, "How are you really doing?" Sometimes it means putting your phone down. Sometimes it means sitting beside your wife, even when there's nothing to say. And sometimes it means noticing the person who has spent years taking care of everyone else, and finally asking them, "Who takes care of you?" Today, Sarah and I are still together. Our children are growing up. Our house is quieter now. But every Friday night, we sit together, just the two of us, and we talk. Sometimes about serious things, sometimes about absolutely nothing. And before we go to sleep, I always tell her the same thing. "I love you." But now, I don't say it because it's a habit. I say it because I finally understand what those words mean. Because love isn't just about staying when everything is easy. Love is noticing, listening, forgiving, and choosing the same person, even after you've both changed. If there's someone in your life who always seems strong, check on them. If there's someone who always takes care of everyone else, ask them if they're okay. And if there's someone you love, don't assume they already know. Tell them, because sometimes the person standing beside you is quietly fighting a battle you know nothing about. And sometimes all they need is for you to finally look at them and say, "I see you." Please like, comment, and subscribe this channel for more heart-touching story. See you in the next video.